A very warm welcome to you, and thank you so much for joining our Homeopathy 24/7 podcast. We are going to be speaking to an array of international guests who will share their knowledge and experiences of homeopathy with you. We will discuss all types of subjects such as remedies, symptoms, and stories of health. No matter where you are with your homeopathic journey, we aim to inspire you on your quest to natural health and living. The podcast is brought to you by Greensmith, the founder of Homeopathy 24/7, which is a global platform connecting you with a homeopath wherever you are in the world, 24 hours a day. So let's get started with today's chat. Please welcome Mary Greensmith.
Hello, thank you very much for joining us today. It's so lovely to see you. And I'm really excited to welcome Karen Watkins. Karen, welcome.
Thank you.
It's so lovely to talk to you. I've been waiting for this opportunity because I know you through ordering hair mineral analysis. Can you tell us a little bit more about this, about what you do and why you do it?
Okay, yes. So the company I work for, Mineral Check, represents an American lab here in the UK. So work really closely with the American lab. We are really their UK arm. And we test human hair for toxic elements and nutritional minerals. So you can't test vitamins through the hair, but you can test things like magnesium, copper, zinc. You can look for toxic elements like mercury, lead, arsenic. You can look for all of those in one sample of hair. We take about a teaspoon of hair each time and test the hair. And what you get back, now you know this, Mary, as a practitioner, but a lot of your listeners might not, or your viewers might not. What you get back is a graph that explains all the findings and shows you a pictorial representation of what we found in the hair. But then you also get back a report which can be anything from 5 to about 28 pages that explains the findings. And that'll tell you, for example, we might have found a really low magnesium level, and it might explain all the reasons for that and explain how you can correct that. And you wouldn't necessarily correct a very low magnesium level just by giving magnesium, because you'd need to think about whether or not the magnesium is being absorbed. So what's digestion doing? And we can look at that once we know what some of the minerals are. We might need to think about whether or not you need B6. So we can look at that. If you just take magnesium, you lower sodium, and now that might have an impact on the adrenals and how you handle stress. So all of that sort of thing is looked at in the test.
And what I just love about it is that it's so easy to read. Your report explains this is what's happening and these might be the reasons. And it just makes it so user-friendly.
Yeah, it is really user-friendly. And working with the American lab, one of the things I did when I was first employed was to go through the reports and remove all of the, like I don't think anyone knows what X is over here. What's a rutabaga? Well, it's sweet. That one we know. But I would look at some of the foods and go, oh, trust me, we just don't eat them over here as a regular thing. And, let's not go on and on about hot dogs when that's something that British people might take as a treat when they go to the pictures once in a blue moon, and so we really tried to make that report really user-friendly. Yeah, so thank you for saying we've achieved that. That's great.
Yeah, it's just brilliant. And as a practitioner myself, I will use a hair analysis test when there is something that I cannot see. Obviously, as a homeopath, I can't test anything. And your analysis just gives me a real pinpoint into what actually might be happening. So my question to you is, do other practitioners use you? Can people come to you directly themselves? How does that work?
About 2/3 of our business comes from practitioners such as yourself. Now, I'm a nutritional therapist, so I always find it so interesting talking to homeopaths because you have tools in your bag that I don't know, I don't understand, and I'll sometimes say to a homeopath, oh, okay, so this is really high arsenic, and the homeopath will come back with, yeah, well, it was an arsenicum client. I'm like, right, okay.
Yeah.
Well, You've got a plan for that? That's great. As a nutritional therapist, my plan is to think about their thyroid function and whether or not they need selenium and vitamin E, whereas you, as a homeopath, will come in with lots of other ideas, which is lovely. We also work a lot with nutritional therapists, and about 1/3 of our clientele come to us direct. So they find us on our website, which is mineralcheck.com, and they just buy the test. And we then send them a kit, full instructions, how to take the sample, which is actually really easy. And then they send that in to us, and we send it back with the report. And I know you've seen the report, which shows in a graph what we found, and then the report that explains what it means, but more importantly, I think, what to do. I always think the explanation of what it means is great, but it's what you actually do that is the bit that's really important.
Exactly.
I think often understanding is a bit like the booby prize, oh great, I finally found a reason for my depression, for example. But what do I do about it? And the report will give ideas of what to do.
And I think that is what is so amazing, because let's face it, in mainstream medicine, this can't happen, can it? If somebody has got depression, they can be put on a medication. They're not actually addressing the imbalance of the body.
Exactly. And I think there is a lovely bit of research that says there are 5 distinct types and the researcher called it biotypes of depression. And I think, people are given an antidepressant in mainstream education. And I do think there is a role for antidepressants in mainstream health.
Yeah.
But I always think the mineral check is about like getting to the root cause. One is depressed, and one might be depressed because of life. And let's not, that happens. But actually, if you've had really traumatic experiences, as a lot of people listening in will know, really traumatic experiences affect the adrenal glands. Well, that lowers magnesium, sodium, and potassium. And those 3 will be one of the reasons you might be really depressed. Other reasons, you might have too much copper. You still might have had a lot of trauma in your past.
Yes.
But that might not be the reason you're depressed. It might actually be because you've got a copper overload.
Yes, absolutely. Because, of course, 2 people might be in the same situation with the same background and have the same trauma, but they're going to act differently depending on their susceptibility or whatever else is happening. Or just, the way they react is totally different to the way somebody else reacts. So getting to know your body better has got to be helpful in so many ways, hasn't it?
Absolutely. And I often will describe this as it's the root cause. It is the fundamental balance. And sometimes we'll have clients come along and they'll say, I don't really understand why it's all so low, because I have a great diet. And it's kind of to say to them, well, you're 46, you have a great diet. And I might look at the diet and go, you're right, you have a great diet, but you've only had that for a year or 2. And you're still trying to redo 44 years of partying, drinking, having fun, staying up too late, and working really hard, all of which will take a toll. And then you've decided now to clean up your diet, stop the drinking, cut out all the sugar, cut out the caffeine, become a vegan, have this wonderful diet. But that isn't enough, I think, to correct the past. And that's very often where, if we can look at what's really going on, we can then start to say, okay, you might need supplements. Your zinc level might be really low, so we might need to give some zinc. You might have a really low level of iron, and that might be being caused by a lead overload, or it might be because you don't have enough copper. And we can have a look at all that and then come up with a plan. And I think that's the bit that's so important. I think it's often the root cause of a lot of ill health.
Yes, of course. And it gives us big insight as well, as you mentioned before, about which organs need support right now or from the past as well.
Yes. One of the things that, one of the areas that I'm really interested in is perimenopause, menopause. So I will talk to women who will say, well, I was fine until I hit this point, and then everything went wrong.
Yes.
And actually, when I look at the results of their hair mineral test, I think, no, that was almost like the last problem. There were these problems before. And
Yeah.
I might say to them, okay, so you've got a lot of perimenopausal or menopausal symptoms. What were your periods like? Because my guess is they were really heavy. And I'll go, well, how did you know that? Like, they were really heavy because you have just so little zinc and
Yeah.
so much copper. And
Yeah.
that's giving me a clue that you had an estrogen imbalance way, way back. And then I can see that you've got an adrenal issue and a liver issue. And so put that together, we've got the perfect storm for all the menopause symptoms you're experiencing.
Brilliant, brilliant. So you can really hone in to what was happening previously. But just let's go through about how you actually take the hair and why it's going to give you this information. Can you just
Okay, all right. So I'm going to do a quick demo with mine.
Yeah.
My hair's really short. And so what I would do is I rake it up into a bit of a ponytail like that.
Yeah.
And then I rake some bits down from underneath. And then I just cut those off.
Yeah.
And my colleagues laugh at me because I just grab my office scissors and
Yes.
cut it off. Now, I have a lot of sympathy with women who say, oh, my hair's dropped out, because my history is that I had a really severe accident. And I know what that's like. Mine dropped out too. So I don't have masses of thick, gorgeous, and I'm admiring your thick, gorgeous locks. For you, the symptom would be the system would be exactly the same. Rake it up, pull a bit down, and cut it off. But then you only take the first 3 to 4 centimeters that are closest to the scalp. Now, the sample is weight dependent. So if you have very long hair, like you're going to throw away a lot of the length of the hair and just send the little bit that's closest to the scalp. If you have very, very short hair, like mine is really short at the back, I can send in the whole part because that is the most recent pattern. And what that's going to show is what has happened within the body for the last 3 months. Now, the reason it will show that is because when the hair follicle is under the scalp, it's being washed by all the intracellular fluids, and they carry all of the minerals in them. So as they're moving and circulating around, the minerals are, if you like, sticking to that hair follicle. And as it grows out, it's hardened and it preserves the pattern of what was happening. So we take the bit that's closest to the scalp to get the most recent pattern.
Brilliant.
And then we actually send, and I'm wondering if I've got one handy. Yes, I have. One moment. We send people this little weight card. And this is super cute. It folds up. You fold up the sides and it makes a little seesaw, because we actually need 0.15 of a milligram. I mean, who's going to measure that?
Yeah.
But as you can see, it's like got little slanted sides.
Okay.
So you stand it on this edge, put your hair on here until it does that. Obviously not as extreme as that. And then you know you've got enough hair. So the amount we're going to take is, or need, is about a teaspoonful.
Okay. Okay.
And it doesn't show. Lots of people
Show. Of course it doesn't show, no.
It doesn't show. You know that. You've got long hair, you just take it from underneath. I've got really short hair, it doesn't show.
No.
And if it's like my partner's hair is incredibly short because he uses clippers, I just collect up the clippings and we use those. So we don't even have to cut the sample from him because he's got a really close shave. We can just use the clippings. And again, because it's weight dependent, about a teaspoonful is all we need.
I love it because it is so easy, and it's easy to get the hair from the client to you and the report back.
And people can take it themselves. And I think that's so, they haven't got to wait around. It's not invasive. They've just got to find a pair of scissors and snip it off, which makes it super useful for children as well.
Of course, of course. So let's talk for a moment about how it differs from taking a blood test and why we might want to choose a hair analysis.
So a blood test will give you a snapshot in time, and that's it.
Yeah.
So if you take a blood test and the tourniquet is a little bit too tight, the magnesium level might go up. If you've just eaten fish and salad for lunch, the iodine and potassium might be high. So, because it is a snapshot, if you take the hair sample, for a start, you're looking at a longer period. So it's more of a video, if you like, than a snapshot. But the other really important one, and I'm going to use the element calcium as an example. The body has something called a homeostatic balance, which I know you know this, but I'm not sure who's listening. Homeostatic balance keeps everything within a tight boundary. And the body will only move things out of that boundary if there is an extreme pathology present. So, calcium, held within a very narrow range. If you measure the blood of a 12-year-old, you'll get a calcium reading. If you were then to measure that blood of the same person at 86, you'd still get the same calcium reading. All that's telling you is that's where their blood calcium is. It doesn't really tell you how that calcium is being used. Now, if you measured the calcium of the 86-year-old through the hair, you might find a really high calcium level. And that would tell us that the calcium is not being used correctly. Now, the body would normally put calcium into the bone, but if it doesn't have all the cofactors to do that, it has to store that calcium somewhere. So it starts to store it around the joints. And that's where you might get joint ache, for example. It's just calcium deposition building up in the joints. Once you know that, which you found out through your hair test, you can start to correct that and therefore improve, if you like, improve the garden.
Yeah, absolutely. It just gives you more, doesn't it? And we've already talked about how easy the reports are to read. We've already talked about how you're giving ideas of why certain things might be doing. And I know that as a nutritionist, you will also then be advising about different supplements and things like that.
Yeah, and that's where I always find it quite fun working with homeopaths, because they will do something completely different.
Yeah.
And it seems to work. And one of the things that I often say when I'm at work and I'm talking to people who say, well, I've tried that, it didn't work.
Yeah.
I tried that too. I normally say, look, if only one thing worked, we'd all do that.
Yes, yeah.
Actually, different things work for different people. So start by finding out where you are today, get as much data as you can, and then try different things to find out what's really going to work for you, and what's going to make you feel really well again.
That's brilliant advice. And one thing that you said about the calcium just made me think of another question that I'd like to ask you, because I hadn't ever thought about it before. And that is because I obviously just use you when I'm stuck with a client and I need more information than I can get verbally. But from what you've just said, I can now see there would be a great benefit in somebody having a hair analysis test every 2 or 3 years, and so that they can see the changes and perhaps catch things before they happen effectively.
Do you know, I think that is so true. I do speak to people who maybe did a hair analysis a few years ago, 7, 8 years ago, didn't pay any attention to the results, and then they get it out some years later and they look at it and go, oh, I should have paid attention to that.
Yeah.
That is the reason why I am where I am today.
Yeah.
And I think that you're right. A regular test is helpful every 2 or 3 years, but I think it's only helpful if you are working on the results and changing things. So we have we had a few years ago a lovely administrator that worked in the company, and she would test our hair. You get your hair tested at the company. It's kind of a little bit of a perk. That's what we do. So everyone kind of tests their hair and works on the results. Her name was Karen as well, actually, which caused a lot of confusion in a small company. Now, she tested her hair regularly, but she never actually acted on the results. And what was so interesting to me is they never changed.
Okay.
Whereas I am a typical practitioner. you know, and I'm sure you're the same. Oh, I've just read that article. I'm sure that applies to me.
Yeah.
I will experiment. I think I'll see what it's like to give up eating gluten for 6 months. Oh, I think I'll give up that for 6 months. I wonder what happens if I have a green smoothie for breakfast every day. And so I test my hair, and I test mine every 4 months, and the result 4 to 5 months, and the results change dramatically. But that's because I'm always changing what I do. And I do try to work with the results, but then sometimes I think, do you know what? Green smoothies for breakfast. Let's see what happens. And then I test my hair just to find out what happened. And that's always quite interesting too.
It's so interesting because it means that we can learn so much more about our bodies, can't we?
Yes.
And we say that about homeopathy. It's the opportunity to take back responsibility for your own health. And this is it in a nutshell, isn't it, really? It's that opportunity to learn what is actually happening and what can you do about it.
Yeah. I mean, we don't come with a manual, do we? And I like that you say that about homeopathy, because I say that about nutrition too. It's about taking responsibility for your own health and working with your body to change things.
Yeah, brilliant.
And I think the hair mineral test just gives you the opportunity to learn what's going on where you are now. And it's sort of kind of interesting to look at it and go, oh, you know, I tested a client recently and they came up really, really high in arsenic. And when I spoke to them, they worked on a farm. And they'd used that arsenic, well, not a farm actually, it was a small holding, but they'd been using that arsenic routinely on soil and in pesticides and so on. And then they were able to look at it and go, so although I wore gloves, it did affect me. And they can work on that.
Exactly. It just opens up their eyes to actually what we're being affected by in the environment as well, doesn't it? And often, I mean, this is our problem being a homeopath, is that we can say, okay, yes, that trauma happened or this trauma happened. We don't know what's in the air. We don't know what chemicals are coming down, you know, on us, or what they're putting in the water, or, you know, how other things are actually affecting our bodies.
Yeah, one of the elements we get asked to test for a lot is mercury, and which we do. And we'll get people say, but I don't have any fillings. Why would I have high mercury? And I talk to them about the fact that mercury is in the fish that you eat. And the fish that you eat has carbon bound to it. And the body is designed to run on carbon chemistry. I've kept that quite simple. So you can absorb the carbon that's in the fish quite easily. And you know, sometimes someone will say, well, I don't eat fish either, so I don't know where my mercury has come from. And just occasionally, when I've done a lot of sources, I might say to them, just out of interest, do you ever wear a waterproof mascara? And they'll say, yeah. I'm like, did you know there's mercury in that? You would never think that your waterproof mascara would contain mercury. But it does, just a tiny trace amount, because that's what stops anything growing in it when you use it.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing. It's just thinking, isn't it? Okay, you know, we don't know what is affecting us and how it's affecting us, but the fact that you can actually see, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. You have got too much of this and we need to do something about it.
And I also think, you know, you made a point, you don't know what's in your water, you don't know what's in the air. No, you don't, but you can make yourself well enough so that doesn't matter. And you know, I gave a lecture once to a group of nutritional therapists, and I caused an absolute outcry because I said that I thought our role was to get people. Now remember, these were student nutritional therapists, so they are super on their diet. I said, well, I think that our role is really to get people well enough to eat at McDonald's if that's what they want to do. And I was like, this sharp intake. And someone said, but Karen, you're not advocating that, are you? With absolute horror. And I went, I wasn't advocating it. I was just saying that our role is to get people well enough. And I think you would probably find that as a homeopath.
I love that. Yeah, because for me, I'm, you know, seeing a lot of people who've got food allergies and severe food allergies, and it means that they cannot eat out. ever, or even eat at other people's houses. And I keep saying, my whole goal is so that you can eat out. You know, you have to be able, we have to be able to survive in the best way that we can in the world that we live in, don't we? And that means being sociable and
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. And it means engaging with the world as it is. I mean, yes, it would be
yeah,
lovely to go off and live on a beautiful little island and grow all your food organically and be restful and so on. Although I'm sure I'd be so bored that my adrenals would crash through sheer boredom. But I think it is about being as well as you can for the world you are in. And I think that's where, say, looking at your mineral status, do you know, I'm just going to throw in something. Just in case anyone goes off and Googles this, because you raised the point about food allergy. I do know that if you Google it, you can find out that you can test for food allergies through the hair. And I just want to put a marker down that that is absolute rubbish. You cannot do that at all. There are things you can test through the hair, like drugs and alcohol metabolites and so on. But you cannot test for food allergies through the hair. We sometimes will say this person might react to these foods on the report, but we're saying that because the mineral pattern tells us the person is low in anti-inflammatory hormones. So we know that they can't make a response properly, but we also know that certain foods just aren't going to work for them with their mineral pattern. And so we're not saying they're allergic to it. We're just saying it's really not going to work right now. But I do know if you Google it, there are companies which will claim you can test for parasites and food intolerances and so on. And I really don't want people to go off and do that and think that this will be a great idea, because it's just not possible.
And that's a really, really good point. So thank you for bringing that up, because obviously what we're talking about really is helping people build resilience, isn't it?
Yes, I love that phrase. That is it. And I think if you can get your I often say to people, if you know, I realized that we tested your rubidium and it was particularly high, and this is the problems that rubidium will cause. Actually, if you can just balance your calcium, your magnesium, your zinc, your copper, and your sodium and potassium, just 6 elements, if you can balance those 6, everything else falls into place. And I think if you can focus on that, that's so simple.
Yes.
Just work on the 6, the rest will fall into place.
Yes, absolutely. That's brilliant. Karen, just tell me, have you got a case or something where you can show what actually happens if people start to make changes in their life after having
Shall I use the one I was telling you about when we were chatting before we started?
Yes, please.
So I was telling Mary about this. This is actually quite an old case, but it runs over quite a long period. A little boy came with his mom into my clinic, and he was excluded from mainstream education because he was violent, extremely violent. No parent would let their children play with him because he was so aggressive and so on. And so we worked on his diet, and there was a lot to do with the diet. But I tested his hair and we worked on the results. Now, over the years I worked with this little boy, let's call him Tom. Over the years I worked with Tom, he went back into mainstream education. Now, I think that is remarkable for a child that's been excluded.
Yes.
But what's even more remarkable was that he ended up in a school that streamed, and Tom ended up in the very top stream. He was very, very bright, very able child. And he was doing really, really well at school. And as he progressed, he came regularly. It actually ties in with something you said earlier, Mary, about coming back for just checking how you're doing every couple of years, because that's exactly what Mum did. Once a year, she would test his hair and she would make slight tweaks to his supplement protocol. And he did take quite a lot of supplements. But Mum was happy because we had got such an amazing change in the little boy. And one day, Dad was reviewing their finances and decided that they could economise. Surely Tom no longer needed all of these supplements, because he had reviewed their hair tests and they hadn't changed that much. And I can explain why they hadn't changed at the end. They hadn't changed that much. So clearly, his son would have, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners will smile at this, got better on his own. And you're nodding knowledgeably because you're thinking of the number of people you've heard of going, well, you know, I just went into remission. Just went up.
Yeah.
No, I'm sure it didn't have anything to do with the remedies you gave me, Mary. It just happened. Anyway, Dad decided that Tom no longer needed to take supplement protocol, don't need his hair tested. We're just good to go. And within 6 weeks of stopping the protocol, stopping taking his supplements, being a little bit more relaxed about his diet, they got a phone call from school asking them to come in. And when he'd moved back into mainstream education, his record had been sealed. So the school didn't know his complete history. But the school had very wisely decided there was something wrong at home, and they wanted to talk to the parents about what was going on at home, because Tom, this incredibly brilliant child, had begun to be disruptive in class, and he'd gotten into some fights, and they couldn't explain why. And Mum phoned me the following day, and she said, well, the minute I got him out of that classroom, that office, I said to him, he's going back on the supplements immediately. He went back on the supplements, and he returned to being a delight to teach. And I think it kind of raises the question, although that's a lovely case study that really shows that by testing and working with the results, you can make phenomenal changes. Because in Tom's case, that was remarkable. You know, excluded from mainstream education, socially inept, and so to go back into school, to be incredibly bright. He has gone on to university. The question does come up, why didn't his hair test change that much? And I think sometimes for some of us, it's like we have a reservoir that needs to be refilled.
Mm-hmm.
I think what was happening with Tom was, as he was going through puberty and the stresses of growing up and school and doing his highly achieving, I think that was placing a lot of a demand on his mineral levels. And I think that's why the reservoir never got full, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Everything he was taking was building that life around him and allowing him to engage really fully in it. But I don't think the reservoir ever got full. And I did actually talk to him about the fact that I thought he would probably need to continue with some kind of supplementation throughout university and throughout his first job, just to keep himself on an even keel. And he's really happy with that.
And I love the fact that you used the word even keel as well, because throughout that and throughout that whole experience, everything that was happening there was you know, allowing him to be more comfortable and enjoy his life more.
Absolutely.
You know, it just makes us happier if we're working properly, doesn't it? It just makes everything more smooth. It makes us less susceptible to overwhelm. It makes us more able to cope with, you know, the ups and downs of life. And it allows us to live a much smoother life.
And I think also it really helps the people around us. One of my most, as you were talking, I just remembered an email I had some time ago now from a client that I had forgotten. And she just said, I thought you'd like to see the attached photograph. And I clicked on it, and it was a graduation photograph. It was someone receiving their degree certificate. And she said, so that was my autistic son that I was told would never, ever be able to function by himself or independently. And there he is receiving his degree. I mean, that one brought me to tears, because I'd actually forgotten all about them as clients, you know. And I don't mean that unkindly. It's just like you, I probably see a lot of people. And yet she thought enough to send me the photograph, because she clearly remembered it was the interventions. And I think when you said what you did, I thought, but it's actually not just one life that gets affected, it's all the lives around. because, she actually thought that she was going to look after him forever because he'd never be able to live independently or
Yeah.
function independently. And there he is, off getting his degree.
Yes, yes. And she'll be just so thankful that she took some actions to change the whole future.
And I think that's remarkable. So it's not just one life that gets affected, it's the lives of people around, And I think one of the areas I work in predominantly is depression. I do talk to a lot of people who've had depression diagnosed, and that affects the whole family.
Of course.
But if you can change that, it
Mhm.
changes the life of the whole family too.
Yes, yes. That's amazing. And it's yes, I haven't really thought of it for depression because I always think, it's all about, changing routines and changing other things. But this really brings home that actually you can see why the body, why the chemicals, why the hormones aren't working correctly. And you could do something about it. So it's just a brilliant, brilliant example. Thank you so much for coming today and talking to me.
You're welcome.
It's been lovely, lovely chatting.
Lovely to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mary.
Thank you so much, Karen, for joining us and explaining about the hair mineral test. I find it so important that we understand just what we're asking, what is possible, and what choices we have got. And everything that we know about leads to more choices. Now, next week, I'm just going to bring you up to date on what it has been like, our first 5 months of living on a very small island. I look forward to seeing you next week, and I hope you can join me. Take care. I do hope you've enjoyed these episodes, and I do hope you can subscribe to our channels. Now, there are various ways for you to listen to our podcast or watch it on video on YouTube. So whether it's iTunes, Spotify, or YouTube, please do subscribe and please do leave us a review. If you leave us a review on these platforms, then more people will see our podcast. We just want more people to share the joy of homeopathy. It's a choice that everybody should know about. Please do everything you can to help us help more people.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode and look forward to listening to our next one. Please don't forget to follow our podcast on your chosen channel, and please do leave us a review so we can continue to share homeopathy with as many people as possible. If you do have any questions, please do reach out to us on any of our social platforms mentioned in the show notes. We at Homeopathy 24/7 hope to empower you on your natural health journey.